There are a lot of things that make Back to the Future the revered classic it is today. It's a fresh concept, it's got great characters and great acting, the music, the logo, the dialogue.
Are you telling me that you built a time machine? Out of a DeLorean?
I could talk about those things all day, but instead I want to focus on just one aspect of what makes this film so effective: narrative. Let's back up just for a bit. For the uninitiated, what does that word even mean? Narrative. It seems to be a term thrown around a lot by academics and intellectuals who want a smarter sounding word for story. And in a lot of ways that's completely true. Narrative's definition is pretty much the same as the definition for story. Of course, when people talk about a film's narrative or they comment on how this particular story has such an interesting narrative, they're not talking about the story itself, but the way in which the story is told, the narrative device. Some narrative devices include, obviously, narration, or in media res, flashbacks, flash forwards, MacGuffins, or Chekhov's gun, which we've talked about before in this video. Chekhov's gun is basically a guide to trimming the fat. Remove everything that has no relevance to the story, and Back to the Future is a lean script. Almost no dialogue in this film is wasted. Almost every scene in the beginning of this movie is loading a gun that will be fired towards the end. Some of these guns are obvious, like Lorraine detailing the events of her first kiss with George, or Doc's story about falling off the toilet and coming up with the idea for the flux capacitor. And of course there's a whole clock tower situation being the most in-your-face setup, which serves to be the film's main climax. Anyway, the film also loads a lot of other subtle guns, which over its 30-year legacy have been pointed out in numerous other videos. Twin Pines Mall to Lone Pine Mall, etc, etc. I've been watching this film my whole life and I'm still discovering little nuggets here and there. Take this scene for example, just before Marty travels back to 1985 after saving his parents' relationship.
The old man really came through, it worked! What? He laid out Biff in one punch! I didn't know he had it in him, he's never stood up to Biff in his life! Ever! No, why? What's the matter? All right!
This tiny exchange here seems relatively inconsequential, but then why include it at all? Chekhov teaches us to remove anything that isn't relevant to the story. Well, this moment actually sets up the new 1985, which Marty travels back to, whereas Mum and Dad are healthier, happier people, and George no longer has any trouble standing up to Biff. Back to the Future is one of the only stories I can think of in which Chekhov's gun genuinely drives the story. See, in most films, Chekhov's gun is just a trope which is maybe used once or twice for some emotional resonance in the story. It's usually a setup and a payoff, not a thematic through line which dictates where the story goes. Another great example is Shaun of the Dead, where the first half of the film tells a story and then the second half is a mirror image of that story. In the same way, Back to the Future is a story and its reflection, only where Shaun of the Dead mirrors the external events of the first half, Back to the Future mirrors its information. And on a more basic level, mirror images is exactly what Back to the Future is about. Marty is a skewed mirror image of his father and a disturbingly accurate mirror image of his mother. So if you haven't seen it in a while, there's no better time to go back and watch Back to the Future with all of this in mind. It's a film that is enhanced through its narrative, taking what could have just been a simple time travel story and giving it this expert finesse and structure and weight.
This is Max Headroom.
Max Headroom?
Ah, Cokeologist.
He sees us.
Where there's a wave, there's a Coke.
I like him.
Join the club. You know, more people prefer the new taste of Coke over Pepsi.
Let's take him home.
Good idea.
So you
Pepsi drinkers, now's your chance. Become a Cokeologist. That's the way. Oh!